Web3 Summit in Berlin. Lovely to have James here from Subquery. You announced some new things you're working on.
We keep thinking, like, what else is right for decentralization here? What else can we look at? And we look at the tech stack for a developer building an application on a blockchain. There's one thing that we're seeing a lot of people starting to build or think about building into the applications, and that's, of course, the big new focus of AI. If you haven't heard about it, you've been living under a rock. AI is kind of taking the world by storm. What we have announced is Decentralized AI Inference. Now, inference is hosting an existing model and allowing it to answer prompts for you, answer questions for you. At the moment, you might use ChatGPT, but of course, all stuff goes OpenAI. Instead, we want to allow anyone to build an open source model and to get very easy, very cheap, very affordable, and very high performant decentralized inference hosting on our network.
Hey, Sohail here. Thanks for tuning in. Real quick before we begin, if you enjoyed this episode, if you learned something, please consider to follow or subscribe or share this episode. That helps us out a lot. It helps us to reach more people and to spread quality education across the space about crypto and Web3. Also, if you're part of a crypto project or represent one and you would like to come on the show or do sponsoring, please get in touch with us. And lastly, everything we talk about today is for educational purposes and no financial advice. Enjoy the show. All right, guys, thank you for tuning into another episode of the TEACHMEDEFI podcast, another one in person at the Web3 Summit in Berlin, a lovely conference organized by the Web3 Foundation, which is blockchain agnostic. And there's also topics being talked about which don't really have to do that much with blockchain at all. So lovely to be here and lovely to have James here from Subquery again. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for having me.
Lovely having a good time here?
Yes, absolutely. It's good to be here. We're good to find a nice quiet space in this place.
Yeah, that was a challenge.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, but it worked out.
But the weather's been great. Like, we could have done it outside. It's a shame.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday was nice. So yesterday was really sunny, but today is a bit, it feels like apocalypse is upon us.
It's getting more Berliner.
Yeah. Berlin, yeah. Maybe before we start, I know you guys have a lot cooking up, so to say. But for viewers who don't know what Subquery is, can you just tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, it's I might start from the start. Subquery originally started in the Polkadot space. We started as the first data indexer for Polkadot. Now, data indexing is it's a technical thing that a lot of people don't understand, but it's very simple when you try to break it down. Essentially, if you're trying to build an application, you need access to data to run the application, to power your user interface, to build experiences based off. And the way that you can query data from a blockchain as it is very inefficient, doesn't work well, and it just makes it very hard to build a good user experience that rivals what you might have in Web 2. So a data indexer is a service or a bit of software that will run alongside the blockchain, and as blocks are added, it will take off data from the blockchain that you are specifically interested in. So, for example, if you're building an NFT marketplace, it will take information just regarding ERC 721 NFTs. And it will save that information that you want in a format that makes it easier for your application to query. The end result is that you have a beautiful data set, perfectly fine-tuned and tailored to your application. It's faster to load. It's more easy to understand and aggregate. It's just easy to manage. Now, that was the start of Subquery. We're still a data indexer. We work across over 205 different networks out there.
Wow.
Polkadot, One, Cosmos, EVM chains, Algorand, Near, you name it, we probably index it. But we've also expanded to think, well, our biggest challenge with the world these days is centralized hosting services. Now, under the hood of your favorite decentralized application, there's this irony that a lot of them rely on these centralized services. And indexing is one of them. So we went out, we built a network to allow decentralized hosting. And the view here is that we want to provide all these infrastructure services in a decentralized way. We want to be able to decentralize without compromise when building applications. So since then, our network, the Subquery network, supports decentralized indexing, but also supports decentralized RPCs. Now, RPCs are the main way that your application talks to the network, the main way your application submits transactions or reads balances. It all goes through RPCs, which are these big computers that provide the gateway to the blockchain. So we've been doing a lot of work on space to decentralize these services, and it's been a lot of kind of tasks to do. But really, if we want to sum up Subquery, we're all about decentralized infrastructure.
Interesting. So you mentioned RPC. So I think a lot of people might not be that technical. They think when they're sending crypto in their wallets, they're like directly communicating with the blockchain, but they actually aren't, right? So basically they're sending that request to a server, and that server does it, sends it to the chain. So.
That's correct, right? To be able to interact with the blockchain, you have to have a part of that blockchain, right? And to run a blockchain node is quite computationally expensive. You can't necessarily run it in a browser. You can't really run it on a mobile phone. You can't run it in a Chrome extension that you might use that looks like a fox, for example. So all of those different applications have to interact with the blockchain. They can't run the blockchain, a node in their local environment. So they will have to talk to an RPC provider. An RPC provider is an external service provider that has all these big expensive nodes running behind the scenes, and they provide a public API, for example, that you can then, I want to submit a transaction signed like this to the blockchain, and the RPC provider say, yep, got it, received, I'll push down to the blockchain now.
Right. And what's the risk there? Why decentralize that part? Because, you don't decentralize for decentralization's sake, right?
No, that's
an
true.
End goal there, yeah.
But the whole point of Web3 is around building an alternative system where no single actor could have an outsized impact on the system, right? No single actor could front run you or could harvest private data from you. And RPCs, in a way, do take us closer to that bad state that we're trying to avoid, right? Having a centralized service provider that handles, let's say, 30% of the requests on a blockchain network and processes those and saves those on the chain, you trust that they're probably going to do it right half the time, but they could go down tomorrow. Things could break tomorrow. They could take down the network or make all apps inoperable. They could theoretically start front running you. They could start looking at traffic coming in and seeing there's a massive buy order for a certain token, and just delay that by a few seconds and front run your transaction there. They could start understanding and analyzing more about your traffic and what you're doing, and maybe start selling that information about your wallet to another party. So they do represent an opportunity for bad actors to be malicious. I'm not saying they do, but I'm saying it's an opportunity. Right. And I say that is the antithesis of the Web3 movement. And we need to try to, intentionally kind of reduce the likelihood that a bad actor could be malicious. One thing I quite liked about Web3 Summit here is a lot of the conversations are around cryptographic and why cryptography is so important in kind of the political landscape these days. And someone said something along the lines of that cryptography is the best way that we can do to prevent man from doing things that bad men will do, right? Malicious acts. It's the greatest way to avoid that. And it's the same with Web3.
Yeah, I like that. So in terms of, if we can not introduce another vector of blind trust, then it's better. Because you don't want to blindly trust again some centralized RPC and not know what exactly is going on.
Trust, don't verify.
Yeah, exactly. So how does that decentralized RPC network then work? Do you incentivize these RPC providers in the network?
So it works the same way as data indexes work. Essentially, we have a network of people that have spare compute around the world, and we want to reward them for that compute. Now, that compute may be used to run data indexes and serve data across the network to people that are using it in their applications, or it could be used for them to run an RPC and to serve RPC queries to people that need it, right? So the whole point here is essentially Subquery is a compute cloud of sorts, and we're providing a way for people to run stuff and sell stuff to the ecosystem and be rewarded for doing so. So a person sends a request to a gateway in Subquery. Let's say it's a new transaction on Polkadot. And our gateway will intelligently distribute that to an independent RPC provider within the network, and put it out there for them to process and respond back to. Now, you may pay a small token or a small percentage of a token for that request, and that reward will then go to that RPC provider that ultimately answered your query.
Okay, and how do you ensure that these are acting right? Like there's no bad actors.
We can't do that.
Right.
That's the problem. So we can't ever verify that any individual is not a bad actor.
Yeah.
But the whole point about distributing requests kind of somewhat randomly or more intermittently across the network means that the likelihood of if one is a bad actor, their impact is much less.
Right.
So we can't prove that you're not stealing data, you're not like front running, and you're not, harvesting private information. But we can reduce the likelihood of the impact, or reduce the impact if you are, by having only a subset of random requests coming to you, not getting the full picture.
Right. Or if someone doesn't execute the request, or is there some sort of staking mechanic?
There's a staking mechanism, of course. So if the network discovers that you've been lying about running an RPC or you're faking requests, then that will be, of course, you'll be slashed.
Oh, right.
So there's penalties around that. It's not. The point I'm trying to make is you can't prove, there's no way right now to cryptographically prove beyond all reasonable doubt that someone's a bad actor.
Yeah.
But we can do what we can to reduce the impact of if they are.
And are these RPC providers staking your token then? Or?
Yes, they're staking the Subquery token on the network to participate in the network, and they are rewarded in Subquery tokens for the work that they perform.
Is your network layer 1, or are you?
It's a network currently running on Base. It's a smart contract, a set of smart contracts. We don't think we need our own network right now. The amount of overhead to build and deploy a network is quite substantial. And to be honest, unless you need a network, don't bother with that. Just launch this as just smart contracts. Yeah. Stand on the shoulders of giants that have come before you. Right.
And why Base? I just recently had someone on from Base building a perpetuals DEX there, former Pantera Capital investor. And we talked about Base, but I'm curious about your take. You're working with all these different blockchains with the indexing part. So you have insight everywhere, kind of?
Smart contracts are based in Solidity. So we need to find an EVM network that was high performant. Base has got a pretty good block rate on it. There's a really strong team behind it. But the other impact we thought that was quite beneficial is we work on these networks across 235 different networks around the ecosystem. And we want to allow people on these networks to be able to come to where the network is and bridge tokens efficiently to get there. And Base had a really good set of connections, integrations, and bridges with all these other networks. It has become somewhat of a hub while still having very low fees. Now, Ethereum might be, of course, the perfect hub, but the fees are a bit more, a bit higher, of course.
Yeah.
So by having on Base, the fees are like a factor of like a 50th of the fees of Ethereum mainnet.
Right.
The team's good. There's also a huge developer ecosystem building on Base right now. It is certainly where a lot of people are building, as you probably discovered recently. So it seemed like the right place for us to launch.
Right. And then today you announced some new things you're working on, as far as I know. So would love to dive into that.
Yeah, it's we're quite happy to do it at Web3 Summit, to be honest, because Web3 Summit is really cool. It's a great venue in Berlin at the Funkhaus. And I think Web3 Summit is like the perfect place where people are really thinking strongly about decentralization. The team here and the people here are really kind of quite passionate about it. So it made sense for us. So what we announced earlier today is the next kind of phase for Subquery. Again, go back to decentralized infrastructure network. We keep thinking what else is ripe for decentralization here? What else can we look at? And we look at the tech stack for a developer building an application on a blockchain. You've got their UI, you've got RPCs, you've got indexes, you might have oracles and storage providers. You have the blockchain itself. But there's one thing that we're seeing a lot of people starting to build or think about building into the applications. And that's, of course, the big new focus of AI. It is definitely, if you haven't heard about it, you've been living under a rock. It needs no introduction. But AI is kind of taking the world by storm. And what we're seeing, though, is a roaring sign of the old way, where two big companies becoming the primary kind of monopolies or oligopolies or duopolies of AI. You got Google and OpenAI kind of controlling, I'd say, almost 80% of the world's AI effort right now. And there's a massive concern, or I have at least, of every query I use that I send to ChatGPT or Gemini goes through their servers and is saved in perpetuity for them to then use and improve their own closed source models. Now, we think that's not a good thing for the world. That is like the existing Web2 model, but on steroids, in terms of centralization. So what we have announced is Decentralized AI Inference. Now, inference is hosting an existing model and allowing it to answer prompts for you, answer questions for you, provide information back. At the moment, you might use ChatGPT, but of course, all stuff goes to OpenAI. Instead, we want to allow anyone to build an open source model and to get very easy, very cheap, very affordable, and very high performant decentralized inference hosting on our network. It makes sense because it means that a lot of people have spared GPU compute around. Inferences require as much as training. And we can run a network of people, of nodes that are running these models and can answer prompts or queries for users. So that's what we've announced today and built.
Interesting. So these GPU providers, for example, are these different models of GPUs, or do they have to be a specific?
We don't dictate that. We never dictate the compute or where the computers run from our node operators. We're very intentional to say you decide on the market factors of play. I think a lot of people, node operators, use like cloud providers. I'd advise them not to, because cloud providers are unnecessarily expensive.
Right.
A lot of them, I do believe, have at-home servers, for example. They're very cost optimized and cost focused.
Right.
So we don't dictate that, but we do know from our talks with them that a lot of them do have spare GPUs around. Now, not, of course, the most latest NVIDIA graphics cards that cost a ridiculous eye-watering amount.
Yeah.
But we don't think that's necessary for inference, especially for slightly smaller models, like maybe not the largest models, but some smaller models that are being more optimized. And that's kind of where we're focusing on. Like, let's say you want to build a wallet application that has a kind of assistant that talks to you about, like, let's say you can ask it things about your wallet.
Right.
You might want to, of course, pre-train a model around, or fine-tune a model around terminology around wallet and what you can do with it, where's bridges and what decentralized exchanges you have available. But then you might then want to run that model and provide the context of the wallet to that model and just get answers back through your application, right? You could go to OpenAI and of course, contribute to their closed source stuff.
Yeah.
But we're trying to provide an alternative where you can deploy that network and you can run those inference tasks through our network for your wallet.
So who do you see as a target audience in terms of demand for that service? Is it mainly developers, or is it
mainly developers? Yeah. So we're not trying to focus on the consumer side.
Right.
Our customers are themselves, I think, will be focused on the consumer side. We want to give our customers, they're already using us for RPCs, already using us for indexing, for data indexing.
Yeah.
We're going to say, well, hey, you can build an intelligent application now. An intelligent application that has some kind of AI baked in. If it's an NFT marketplace, it might have some kind of generative AI kind of view, or a generative AI kind of artwork around their main artwork, for example. It might have some generative AI to then look at, like, to go find and find similar artwork just like this, for example. Those are the kind of workloads that we imagine our customers might want to use this for, and we want to provide them with a hosting platform that they can run these jobs on.
I guess it makes sense to go for developers because you kind of have the distribution there already with all these different teams that are using Subquery for other purposes. How do you incentivize and make sure these, for example, let me give you an example. If this is decentralized, there could be a GPU provider that says they're running the larger model for the query that comes in, but he's actually running the smaller model.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so because it's less costly for him, and the output might not be the one you're actually looking for.
That's correct. We're looking at how to fix that problem right now. That is a tricky one to solve. And we've got some ideas of how we're going to solve that. We have a concept called proof of indexing, or proof of work, proof of like validity of what you're doing. And for an RPC, we can use that. We can verify that by, we kind of use a combination of latency and block, kind of the most recent block hash
Yeah.
to kind of report that, make sure you're running a node. For indexing, we can compute a cryptographic hash of the entire data set in the database. For AI, we're not quite sure yet how to solve that. We've got some ideas, but that is something we need to solve.
Yeah,
making sure they're not cheating and running this like tiny version of a model and saying they're running the big Goliath model.
Yeah. I think obviously crypto and AI is like a topic that, in my mind, I'm curious to hear what you think. It's quite running very hot at the moment. Like even here at the Web3 Summit, there was so many side events around AI and crypto, and it comes up in panels and all that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of projects that are popping up, and I think there's a lot of noise as well, and a lot of like projects that are kind of riding that wave, maybe to close a larger funding round or something like that, because perhaps you can put a premium on it as soon as it's AI in there at the moment.
We're at ECC, for example, and I think like 70% of all side events had an AI in the name or something. There's some kind of AI part of it, right? I completely agree. It's too much noise about it right now.
Yeah. So how do you think about, like, obviously you guys have a track record in the space, and you're doing great. And how do you think about cutting through the noise? Also that your message might get diluted with other stuff that is actually nothing fundamentally useful that is being built in the AI crypto space at the moment.
Ultimately, we just have to prove what we're doing by doing it, right? And actually delivering. I think a lot of startups that talk about AI, and we've talked to some other teams in the AI space, and they've kind of basically said this to us, is that, look, they're like the 50th team that come talk to us about AI, and we just kind of want to see a bit more like fun, like what are you doing, and prove what you're doing first. Give us like,
can I use it? Can I test it?
Give us a testing version of it first before we kind of carry on this conversation, because we got burnt too many times by people that just want to like have announcements and write a white paper and raise money.
And who said that? Was that
some other AI companies in Web3? I won't name them. But
okay.
we got that skits around, and I completely understand that. It's kind of it's a bit terrible. But I do understand, like, if you're a software developer, there are two leading edges of software development, and one is Web3, one is decentralized technologies, and the other one is AI. Those are the two bleeding edges. So it makes sense. It's very rational that people that work in Web3 have a very serious interest as well, or side interest in what's happening in AI, because it's, we kind of see it as the forefront of our industry.
Right. And obviously the notion of blind trust is as well very big in AI. Basically blindly trusting this
black box machine.
Yeah. So philosophically, it makes sense, this connection between Web3 and AI, I think, to make things better and more useful for humans. But I think there's a lot of like details to iron out, as you said, in the terms of, for example, this verified compute, thing. And at the same time, not to become too silly in terms of putting everything on chain, which is...
Of course not, like... We're not running AI workloads on chain, and anyone that would suggest that they should is clearly not understanding the problems around that. You have to do this in a smart way. Now, I think people will undeniably understand that large language models right now are at a point that they're pretty amazing. And they're only getting better and better over time.
The open source ones as well.
And that's what I love about this, is that, for a long time, this is this like closed source versus open source competition in the AI space. Like there was a memo that was leaked from Google last year where an internal Google person wrote something like, "We have no moat compared to closed source."
I remember that.
And it's great to see, as much as you may hate Meta, seeing how that they've gone around the path of like, look, we're going to open source our model because we believe the benefit that the community will bring back to that model will outweigh the costs of making that open source. And like the latest Llama 3 models are pretty damn good. They're getting to the point where they're almost as, if not better than, the previous generation models from the closed source kind of firms. And that's probably good enough for most people. Like, if you're not wanting to write or like cheat on your postgrad PhD kind of thesis, then that's probably fine, right? So we do think that there is a big opportunity to add in a restrained way AI workloads into applications.
Yeah.
I use AI all the time to help kind of optimize my time. If I want to summarize a article, or if I want to get some talking points for a topic potentially, or if I want to plan an itinerary for a place where I'm going next weekend. AI is great for helping with that, right? It gives me the average of humanity's kind of summation of this topic. But it doesn't replace the world. So we do think there's a space for it. It probably isn't going to meet the same like high lofty expectations as what everyone thinks right now. Of course not. But we think it will kind of, it will have a place. And so we want to provide a hosting opportunity for that, because that's an area of the market where we think is underserved. If you want to host an AI model today, there are a couple of expensive tools with the big cloud providers. You can do it yourself, but that's a series of ML ops that you don't really want to have to do. It's like DevOps, but harder. And everyone knows how painful DevOps is. And when you run production applications, it's going to go down at some point. So we want to provide an alternative for those people that want a better hosting platform that's cheaper, a bit more decentralized than the cloud providers.
No, I think that's a lovely goal to have, and I'm curious what it will look like soon. You mentioned Meta as well, and obviously they're pushing open source, but at the same time it makes great business sense for them as well, because they're kind of like protecting their core business. If the moat would end up with the creators of these models like OpenAI, then the market power would shift there. But if it stays with the distribution which Meta has, and the models themselves become more commoditized because they become there's more competition around them and they become cheaper, and you have more options, so they can charge at high prices. It helps Meta protect its core business.
Well, Meta used an example where they open sourced all the internal like bridges and network switches and stuff within their data centers. They open source like the source code that ran on those to kind of manage large scale, massive scale internet infrastructure. And they said that they estimated they saved hundreds of millions of dollars because of the open source, and because other people started improving that, and they didn't have to do that themselves. So there is a bit of historical context here that they're using. So let's say it happens again. Maybe it will happen again, right? But I don't know about you, but playing around with AI is pretty cool. There's some cool tutorials on like places like communities like Hugging Face, where you can go on and you can very quickly fine tune a model to, rather than give me back answers that are entirely in crypto speak, or entirely in crypto Chad speak. Which is, why would you do that? I don't know, but it's kind of funny.
But when you fine tune them, like you're running them then, right? So where are you running them in that case again? If they're too big, this is the problem.
You'll be running locally on your computer usually,
So that's smaller models.
Yeah, smaller models that you run locally and you fine tune, and then you kind of run them, just kind of test how it goes, and you can deploy them back to Hugging Face and pay money for them. But we're talking about bigger scale maybe, and we're talking about production hosting, not just one or two queries every few minutes. It's like we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of queries a minute. That's what we're trying to get to.
And where are you at then in terms of roadmap? What's next?
So we've just today launched a demo interface that everyone can go and play with now and try. It's running off node operators on a testnet. Very soon we'll start adding people or releasing code so node operators on our mainnet can start doing this, and we'll be moving the demo to the mainnet. We've got running Llama, Gamma, which is Google's open source version of Gemini, and Mistral as well, 3 models, which are all 3 open source. We have a kind of preference to open source, of course. And then from there, we're going to slowly improve things. We're going to scale these out. We have to work out a payment model, a token-based payment model, so how people can pay for it. And always our goal is to create a Web3 or a decentralized payment model that kind of matches as closely as possible the Web 2 way. And the Web 2 way has coalesced around a token-based payment where you pay per input token, and a token might be a part of a word. So, for example...
Okay, so here you have to differentiate.
Unfortunately, yes. It's fucking confusing. It's our token and then tokens. Pay X Subquery tokens for these many input tokens.
Input
Input
tokens.
output tokens. Yeah, so it's annoying, but we have to deal with that one. And later on, we'll be working on how users will be able to supply RAGs, or retrieval augmented generation. I think it's the correct acronym. It's a terrible acronym. RAG files, so like basically contextual data to an existing model, and say, big model here, can you execute this prompt with a knowledge of this information?
Right.
And we're working to add that to our network. And then we're also going to be improving our index to be a bit more AI kind of conscious, so have some context AI, so we can easily integrate an AI with index data set from our indexer. Right. And so you could index, for example, Uniswap v3, and you could say, hey, tell me about the patterns recently of trades that have happened. Tell me if there's anything extreme or weird that's occurring today across the Uniswap pools. And the AI would be able to contextually read that data, the index data set, and return to you kind of information around that in a better format.
Okay. Yeah. And how do you connect the off-chain compute that the GPU providers do to the on-chain payment then for them having done that compute? Is that
our network code, there's code that services that the node operators run on their local machine that manages the payment. So it keeps track of the requests or the prompts or the tokens they've responded to.
Right.
And will through the network distribute rewards to them accordingly.
Right. Is it like an oracle that talks to the on-chain thing then? Or
no, not necessarily. It just runs. So the network itself will know how many tokens have been sent to this node operator.
Right.
And so the network through the contracts will be able to distribute the token pool to the reward pool to those node operators accordingly.
Gotcha. Because the node operator is also themselves the GPU provider.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Lovely. This is really interesting. I like the new direction, or the added direction.
It's always an added direction. It's not a new direction. That's the thing. You know? The question for us is always like, what new verticals can we provide a decentralized alternative to?
Yeah.
That's like the overriding kind of view here, is that we think and wake up at night and cold sweats at 3 a.m. thinking about that question.
Yeah.
And so next might be something new. We'll keep going. But the idea here is to really build that decentralized infrastructure platform.
Yeah.
So people do, when they go to build an application, they can viably choose like verticals in their tech stack that don't require a centralized service provider. That's the overriding goal.
Right. Lovely. Well, it was lovely to see you again, James, and all the best with that.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure.